Welcome to anyone who's joining us for our panel on motivating sales teams. That money isn't everything, and a strategy for motivating your sales team. Just as a starting point, Hypercontext is an app to help managers and their teams streamline objectives, meetings, and feedback into one workflow. A lot of our work really gets done in meetings. We need to make them better to really get those outcomes we want. And in the last, month or so, I've been talking to a lot of sales leaders. Good reminder that sales leaders are incredibly disciplined with their time. And I think we think a lot about that in terms of having enough selling time and working with our prospects, but that goes internally as well. They really have those meetings need to be focused, so that flow of information is going up and down the organization to help achieve those really big goals. So they're going to have an agenda, they're going to be prepared, they're going to prepare for success. Same way you go into a prospect meeting or into any sales cycle prepared to succeed, you need to do the same with a meeting. Make sure that you have everybody involved, make sure that you've got a focused agenda, make sure that you're talking about your goals all the time, and then follow through. Critical again for those important deal cycles, but also for your meetings, have notes, have follow-ups, all those kinds of things. So when we look at how we spend our time, we want to spend it efficiently, and that's certainly something we're focused on. The sort of instigation of today's sales panel really came out of a set of research we did late last fall. We actually surveyed about 500 plus people from high performing tech teams, about really what helps them stay motivated and grow. And then recently we just took a look at specifically those respondents in sales, and what really came through for us was some data about how actually they're motivated. So no surprise really, based on what we know from sales, salary and comp is a top motivator, but there's a ton more. And actually once you pay someone fairly, there's a bunch of other things you really need to do to retain and attract top sales talent. And for this kind of market where it's so competitive to hire, it's really important for us to be paying attention to those things beyond comp. And so that's why I invited a few folks here to talk to me about the strategies they're using to motivate their sales teams, how they see this sort of playing out in their own businesses. And I'll introduce myself and what motivates me, and then I'll ask the panelists to do the same. So my name is Jocelyn Brown. I'm the head of CS and sales here at Hypercontext. And for me, what motivates me actually is just the variety of people I get to speak with. I spent most of my career supporting marketers in the marketing function, who I still love to speak with, but now supporting a tool that actually can help any part of the business. So I'm getting to learn a ton about what goes on in engineering and product, and spending more time with my sales peers and otherwise. So for me, it's just a variety of businesses and professionals I get to talk to in any day. And that's just satisfying my curiosity and need to always learn. So Chris, why don't you give us an introduction and what's motivating for you?
Yeah, thanks, Jocelyn, and good to virtually meet everyone. Chris Bondarenko. I run North American sales here at Docebo. I've been doing that for just over 2.5 years now. I have about 15, 16 years in sales and sales leadership at various SaaS companies. So yeah, based out of the little town of Ancaster, Ontario. What motivates me, I kind of want to piggyback on what you shared there, Jocelyn, but a slight different take on it is new experiences, which do allow me to learn. I love being placed in new experiences and learning new things as a result. The best way to learn is to fail and to fail forward and so on. But yeah, I just get a kick out of learning new things and trying new things. So that's what motivates me.
Awesome. Michelle, what about you?
So I am Michelle Pietsch. I'm VP of Revenue at Dooley. Dooley is my fourth startup building out the sales teams. So I've spent a majority of my career, very long hours, grinding it out, building out the org from anywhere between 3 to close to 100 sales reps. So what motivates me now is to show my two boys, 2 and 4, what that hard work actually pays off. And I want to show them that you can balance work and life and be successful at the same time. And early on in my career, I didn't think that was possible. So now I'm making that a priority, but I want to show them that, hey, mom can do something other than, laundry and dishes.
That's awesome. So already 3 people sharing what motivates them outside of that sort of comp plan. I'm going to move into how you guys can also learn from these, longstanding sales professionals about how they motivate their teams. Michelle in particular, having gone through that startup journey multiple times, very different phases. I think there's a lot to be learned in that of evolution of teams and what's available to them. So we're going to have a discussion around 3 broad topics. Also, the Q&A is open, so please feel free to join. But we're going to start just with the impact of transparency and how to approach it. We're going to move into how to support career growth among your sales teams. We know that fulfilling and challenging work is sort of a top motivator for our sales professionals. And then we'll move into sort of implementing the right support and tools, and really what helps people stay engaged, motivated. And I'll just start with the transparency. When we look at those sort of top 3 factors impacting productivity for sales professionals, it's clear goals, understanding the bigger picture, and access to resources. And I think that clear goals and expectations and seeing how your work impacts has a lot to do with transparency. But also, Michelle, I really put this on the agenda largely because of the conversation that you and I had, and you shared a real passion around that sort of topic of transparency and how you use that to really make sure that your team is engaged and motivated.
Yeah, I think it's super important. And it's something that I've received on the leadership level at many different organizations, that we weren't transparent enough. And I think it might be a change in the environment over the years, but reps want to know what the vision is. What are they working towards? And I've had really good C-level be as transparent as possible, more specifically around the vision, our goals. If we're doing well, why is that? If we're not doing well, be open about it, because people see right through it. And I've seen lack of transparency fail big time, more specifically on the rep level, because reps are grinding it out every single day. And let's take, the team misses a number, for example, and your CEO gets up there and totally ignores the fact that we didn't do well. Well, it doesn't sit well with people, and it's not motivating to reps on how to actually get out of that hole and what they're running towards. So I think it's extremely important for you to just lay it out all on the table for everyone. Share your goals, share your revenue targets, and at the C level and even VP level, share your why. Why are you here? Why are you grinding it out? Why are you trying to get to your goal every single month, every single quarter? Because that provides people with a stronger vision, and I think like unification across the team. For me specifically, I'm as candid and open as possible, because people will ask, this is their job, this is their livelihood. They'll ask about, oh, what do you think? We're an IPO or acquisition? Or what do you think about the product vision? And if you put everything in this like shiny light, when reality is like they see through that bullshit, they're like, but we just lost like 5 deals to competitors, and you're not open about that. That really impacts morale. So I'd say like, just get it all out there and have those real conversations with your team, whether it's a broader team, in a company level, just to give them an overview of the metrics and revenue and where you're running towards, or a one-to-one level. I think it's important for managers to be as transparent as possible. I'll be open and honest with you if you ask the questions, and that, I think, you're building trust, and also you're working on the morale of the team when you're as honest as possible. And it also is important for you to listen too. So listen to what they're asking, and you can peel back the layers of the onion a little bit and then open up the transparency from there.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where sometimes as a leader, you also forget what you know or what you have shared. And I think that point about listening is super important, because it may be that they just, haven't heard it enough, something that you have shared. And unless you're actually open to making sure that you, like you say, peel the onion, you won't know whether they're going to create stories for themselves anyway. So being, as you said, open and transparent about what's going on allows for a dialogue that means everybody can get back on board, even if you've had a tough kind of go at it.
Yeah, I think it's being an adult and, getting ahead of the rumor mill as well. So if you're not transparent, if you're not open about certain things, then people are going to make it up. And then next thing you know, it's toxic and it just runs through the organization. I've seen that go pretty poorly where leadership just never addressed some major issues across the board. And, it gets all the way down to every level in the org, these terrible rumors that just simply aren't true. And all it took was the CEO just sitting in front of the team saying like, no, this is where we're going. We're actually not being acquired. And everyone's jobs are safe. Like,
yeah, exactly.
But it shouldn't take multiple pushes and nudges for someone to do that. I think it's better to be open and get ahead of that, or else you're impacting the entire org's morale. And you don't want a toxic morale, especially in this environment, because it's super competitive. And if you want your top people to be happy and understand where you're running towards and what your goals are.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that treat people like adults. If we're trying to coddle or save them from some sort of truth, we're probably actually doing ourselves a massive disservice, because they're intuitive, and salespeople are very smart about people. They'll be able to see what's going on. In there was a lot of talk about sort of expectations and goals, and Chris, not necessarily in this conversation, but you and I have talked a bit in the past about sort of the cadence of conversations and meetings and other things that you have with your team, and it's very goal oriented. So how do you make sure that there's that clarity around expectations and goals? What's the sort of trick to keeping everybody on that same page and on the mission with you?
Yeah, I don't think there's one silver bullet, but I think there's a tool, and we've just recently adopted this tool at Docebo, which is the V2 Mom approach. I think made famous by organizations like Salesforce, for example. So that's allowed us not only to be highly transparent, but goal and metric focused and method focused. How are we going to go and drive towards our goals? And the awesome thing with the V2 Moms that I like is I can look up and I can see, our CEO founder, Claudio's V2 Mom. I can see the V2 Moms waterfall all the way down to my managers. And I believe we're in the process right now of the sellers building theirs out as well. So if anyone wants to see how I'm doing, they don't have to ask me. They can go and look at my V2 Mom and they can compare that against our performance. So we are very goal and metric oriented. But I think the challenge is, and I've spoken in a lot of webinars about data, is you don't want to be inundated with data or goals or different metrics, but at the same time, you need to understand the difference between what is a lagging metric like absolute sales and what is something that is a leading metric like conversion from an MQL to an SQL, for example. So the frequency of how you look at that data or look at those goals and metrics is obviously important, whether it's a weekly, monthly, or quarterly cadence too. I think you also have to figure out what's right for your business as well.
Yeah, it sounds like there's both of you there's a balance between making sure that everybody's gotten information and maybe sort of over focusing on that. Because I think one of the things that, again, when I was talking to a lot of sales leader, that sort of discipline with time, one of the things is selling time. You want to make sure you're always making enough for your team and making sure you're giving them the space to be successful, and for them, how they use their time is there. So Michelle, how do you think about that balance between making sure that, they've got all of the available information, but they're focused on the right thing, and you're not, over spinning over one way or the other too much?
Yeah, this is a hot topic for us right now at Dooley, because we have a lot in front of them, more specifically like metrics driven. This is what you need to do. Then we have chat, and then we have outbound prospecting metrics that you need to hit. And I learned the hard way a few years ago where I was just dictating 90 emails, 100 dials, and here's 12 tools that we just rolled out, and I want it to be this way. And I sat with the rep. It was a late evening. He was closing out a deal, and it was a big deal. So I wanted to celebrate it as soon as he hit close one. And it was taking him literally 35 minutes. I'm like, dude, what is happening? Close out the deal. And he said, it takes us forever to close out deals. And I actually sat next to him and I watched, and my mind was blown, because I didn't actually sit down next to my team to understand what their day looks like. And once I did, I realized that it's not easy to do everything that I had expected them to do. So getting on their level is like really, really important before you actually roll out these crazy metrics. And once I did, I realized, okay, well, we can cut half the tools that we put in front of them because they don't use them. It's too much noise. And then we implemented a sales math where it's each individual person peels back what they need to do to be successful, as opposed to rolling out everyone does the same thing. And everyone works differently. So I'd have reps that would do, 25 emails a day, but also book 10 demos. And then a rep that would do something completely different. And that worked for them. And it made it, I couldn't like make it repeatable across the entire team because everyone's different. And it took me a while to roll that out. But having them understand what moves the needle on their end. And then for me, explaining to them, you need to focus on what you can control. And I removed all non-revenue generating meetings, because if you looked at the reps calendars, more specifically at Dooley over the past few months, it was crazy. It was non-revenue generating meetings and all these other asks that we had them do. And then again, I had to get on their level to really understand like what their day-to-day was. So I think it's important just to listen and understand what your reps are doing before you mandate any crazy metrics or data that they have to hit.
Well, I love that perspective that you can have a theory and you can have sort of some guidelines around what is the activity that gets the output that you need, but there are going to be nuances for every person on how they do it, and that the focus needs to definitely be on that outcome. Sometimes you may have to go back into their outputs and to figure out what it is that's not making a match there, but having the flexibility in what you roll out, that people can be who they are, as long as they know where they're going and have the context for it. I want to move to the next topic, because it's somewhat related, just in that, so we learned sort of, one of the things that we also learned from this research we did was that salespeople are almost 2 times more likely to leave because of lack of growth opportunities than salary. So again, salary is always fair payment is always the first one, but then there's this idea of if there's not enough growth opportunity. And I know as a sales leader, sometimes I struggle with that. Not the opportunities weren't always available to be able to give reps that chance to move up either in a type of deal or into leadership. But also that challenge around selling time and making sure that we were balancing their desire to grow in their careers, but also we were trying to protect their time to make sure that we're actually giving them the opportunity to be successful. And when we were talking, Chris, you had quite a bit of passion around this topic, around sort of career growth and opportunities within your organization. And I believe even have rolled out a program to this effect. So how are you looking at, that balance of making sure that, people can see that they have growth opportunities and working towards it without sacrificing so much of what you need to do just to get the job done?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the last thing you want to do is hire someone and then they say, well, I'm only going to take this job because in 3 months I want to get promoted, right?
Yeah,
so
right.
It's like, okay, what's that balance there? Look, even to like unwind a little bit or go back, hyper growth companies growing like Dooley, Docebo, and there's so many awesome SaaS companies growing here in Canada. A little plug for Canadian SaaS there. It's our ability to attract top talent, develop that top talent so they achieve and they attain, and then to retain that top talent. And I think laying out opportunities for career growth or just the development of skills and competencies is key to all 3 of those, right? It doesn't always mean that you're moving from a seller to a manager or a seller moving up market, selling to SMB commercial, moving to mid or enterprise or key or strategic accounts. It's about how you're developing yourself. And so when I hear that, there is that balance, and I don't think there is an ideal ratio of time spent towards growing and actually performing, but I think it's really important. And I look at it here at Docebo is my goal, my North Star when it comes to career growth is, of every 4 positions that are open on my team, I try to fill one of those through internal, right? And that's kind of like my goal there. Because when you always having to hire external, I mean, you have potential culture impacts, performance impacts. You have things like ramp up. You know, we know that in selling, you're hiring today for Q3 and Q4 right now based on ramps. So I think there's a lot there. And so what I did at Docebo, going to it, is building out an actual, I think I called it the transitions program, which is really just an unbiased program that addresses two key components. Well, the first is the candidate readiness. Are we getting these folks ready to take that next step in their career, whether it be moving up market or into a management role? And the second one is, business readiness. And if we know when our headcount and budgets hit, also when the other teams can backfill, then we're in a good spot. Phenomenal BDR leader here at Docebo, Abdul. We were in a meeting this morning and we're talking about career growth. I said, look, I'd love to promote all of the BDRs, but then I'd be robbing Abdul at the expense of trying to, build my team up, and our pipeline might dry up in a few quarters. So you've got to really look at, can the business support this type of a thing or not? And so in the program,
I also like that from like a business readiness, because when I was sort of talking to you about it, that concept of business readiness is you're doing actual, business contingency planning. At the same time, you're also offering this career growth opportunity, which I just think is such a good way to think about it, is that you're looking at the health of those individuals and retaining them, as well as the health of your business and your pipeline to be able to move people into an organization. Because I think sometimes people do kind of career growth almost as a defense kind of strategy. And I like your turning it around to being, it's actually a business continuity strategy. It's a really positive thing. It's not just about making sure we don't lose anybody. It's actually about making sure the business is ready to take advantage. And I love that sort of stance on it. Sorry, I interrupted you, but
no,
I think that's really important.
That's great. Yeah, I the way that you said, I never really thought of it that way, but exactly, we have to continue to run the business and hit the numbers regardless of where we're pulling talent and how we're promoting talent upwards, right? It's such a good point there. I always look at it too. The analogy is like flying in a plane. And this is funny because I used to fly at least once a week, and now I'm firmly entrenched in my home office here. But if you were to pick me up today and just put me up X thousand feet in the air, I'd probably not be able to process that, my body and my emotions and my mindset. But when you're flying, you go through lines, you go through the airport, you're told what to do, stand over here, wait in line here. You're essentially training yourself to get ready to fly. You're getting ready to go. And I take that same analogy here. The last thing I want to do is take an awesome commercial seller and put them in a position where all of a sudden they're expected to deliver mid-market or enterprise numbers. And like, Chris, I don't know what to do, or this is too much for me, right? So I think that's important to take our top talent and ease them into those opportunities as well too. It's on our responsibility to do that, which also gets into the business readiness or the contingencies, because otherwise you might experience a lot of churn as well.
And Michelle, you had sort of an interesting sort of take on this as well, because you talk about you've built from, the ground up multiple times, and there are different stages at a growth company. I think you pointed this out too, Chris, where you just don't have different and new opportunities for those reps, and they're coming, and maybe you can see them, but they're not there today. So can you talk through sort of, especially in that early stage sales team where it just doesn't exist yet, how do you work through that kind of sticky bit?
Yeah, it was pretty difficult when you hire 25, 30 people within 3 months, and they're all at the same level, and then they get that itch to be a sales leader or senior account executive or enterprise. And we kind of failed at that in one of my roles because we didn't have a career progression path at that time, because we really didn't know what the business was going to look like in 6 to 12 months. We were waiting to see, are we going to segment? If we segment, then we'll probably have mid-market account executives and bump some people up. And then we ended up moving way too fast and realizing, yes, we need a mid-market segment. We also need an enterprise segment, but we also only hired SMB reps. So we were pulling SMB reps, putting them in a mid-market segment. They were not prepared at all. So then we ended up hiring from the outside, everyone that was sitting in the seat for, and granted only 6 to 9 months at this point, they were getting angry because they thought that they belonged there. And we learned that we didn't set people up for success. The ones that we moved, we ended up having to either let them go or move them back down, which ultimately wasn't the right thing. And then we pivoted to the like drastic other spectrum of career progression was you have to be on the seat for 2 years and then another 2 years, and then that blew up because no one was getting promoted because we were really early on. And then at the end of the day, it was really like, what's our business need and how can we train the SMB reps to be mid-market reps, and then they're our bench. And then we rolled out a BDR segment, and then it was just an ultimate like pull from that to replace that person and replace that person, replace that person. But when we had the business need, and like Chris mentioned, we want to be able to promote from within and not always hire from the outside, because then that's really demotivating for the team. And we had to, I think it's really important to be as transparent and open throughout the interview process and throughout their career progression conversations, which I highly suggest you're having at least monthly. So there are no surprises, right? When you do hire that inside sales manager from outside instead of from inside, people understand why. You just haven't had that experience yet, but I'll work with you to get you there. And at Dooley right now, that is what we're doing. We have the BDR motion. We have AEs that we're hiring from outside, but we will also promote from the BDR team to the AE team. But I need to make sure we have BDRs to make up the gap. So making sure the BDRs that we just hired are fully ramped and we don't have that hole. So it's really like, what is best for the business, even though everyone's like, I want to be a manager, I want to be a director, I want to be a manager. And I do have an outline of certain expectations that you have to meet in order to get to those levels. There's no timeline, but if you want to be a manager, you're going from an individual contributor to manager is totally different. So and how are you showing that you're ready for that? And these are my expectations of a leader. And then I work with them one by one, check it off. Okay, yeah, great. You've been showing us that you've done that over the last few months and you're ready. But I've seen it fail so many times of just pulling people because they complain that they weren't there. And it's like, okay, well, we're going to lose our top rep because they want to be an inside sales manager. You pull that top rep, they're not ready to be an inside sales manager. And then you're failing that person, but also the team that you put them over. So
yeah, I had the good fortune, I think actually I learned a ton from it, of having the BDR team report into me at one point in my last role. And I learned a ton about sort of that setting of expectations and having clear conversations. I think to your point, you need to make sure you're having those clear conversations regularly, because the last thing you want is to be surprised. So even if you can't offer them exactly what you want, you at least then have a sense of how much backfill you need and what kind of timeline you need. But the other thing I learned too is that by getting exposure to a lot of the things that they think that they want to do, sometimes they find a completely different path, which I loved. I had BDRs go into operations. I had them go into account management. I had them go into marketing. One of them wanted to be a filmmaker. So he went in and did sort of all the video with the marketing team. So I think having some clear expectations. That's why like you're as opposed to like a path that's got a time frame on it, having clear expectations of what that next role has so that they can kind of meet those expectations and progress towards it. And they may, through doing that, realize that's not actually what they wanted. How does that practically play out at the front line? I think the other thing we learned in this survey is that this not enough growth opportunity is a huge reason why people will leave. But the frontline managers that we interviewed feel the least prepared to be able to actually execute on that. So really from either of you, how practically can a frontline manager, you guys have both talked about programs at the kind of org level that have been in place, but if I'm a frontline sales leader and maybe a relatively new leader, how do I actually make that happen day to day and work on those career conversations when I don't necessarily have control on the promotions or otherwise? What would you tell those guys? I didn't prepare
Michelle,
either of you for that
would
question.
you like me to go?
Go for it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean, great question. This is a very authentic response because I haven't thought of this question yet. Jocelyn, good one. So my view of first line management, first off, is that this is the Wild West still in the SaaS world. The effectiveness of an organization is, in my opinion, is largely determined by how strong the first line sales team is.
Yeah.
When I go back, say 10, 12 years ago, the big breakthrough was how to get BDRs or AE self-source prospecting to be more efficient, right? And increase their conversion. You look at tools like a Sales Loft or an Outreach there. Now that's table stakes, right? You have to be able to do that and then more. From a first line management perspective, I believe that right now, it's not table stakes, that you don't have systems and necessarily a lot of scale just yet. How to have those coaching conversations, how to structure your day like a sales management cadence that is scalable and consistent across all managers, for example. So I think that there's still a lot of opportunity in that world. And I believe that over the next few years is where SaaS companies are going to start competing. All that to be said, a very excellent question was asked of me in our executive QBR 3 weeks ago, and I didn't really have a good answer for it. So I'm going to say I don't have a good answer for your question, Jocelyn. We just hired a phenomenal, her name is Nicole, SVP of strategy and revenue performance. And I was talking about how my managers are doing a lot of coaching and how they're giving formal and informal coaching and doing all of this. And I felt pretty good about where the team was at. And Nicole said, well, Chris, how do you know they know how to coach properly? Is the coaching effective? And I didn't have a good answer there. And so that's why I say, I think there's still a lot unknown there and a lot of opportunity. I haven't answered your question, but maybe Michelle.
No, but it's, no, I think you're right. Like that's what I learned again, running a new logo team for the first time. Most of my background's been in customer success, but again, I had a chance to run a new logo team, and the amount of coaching at the frontline level was probably the biggest eye opener for me. And it should have been obvious, but I really got a front seat to the amount of coaching a frontline manager does. So sorry, Michelle, what were you
or
say?
doesn't do,
or doesn't do. Yeah.
or doesn't do. I think honestly, I think it comes from the top, and being in the VP level for a couple years now and not getting coaching or feedback from my manager had me thinking a lot that, if I don't help my directors and frontline leaders, then they're not going to help their team. And it's, practice what you preach. So I needed more, I wanted more coaching and guidance, and I never really got it until I said, hey, can you give me some feedback? But with that, you need to take the time to show your frontline managers how to coach. And also, when a new frontline manager is asked, hey, when am I going to be a senior leader, or when am I going to be a senior AE, do they know how to handle that? And I think it goes back to like the initial question of transparency. So making sure that you're arming your team with as much information as you can about like the career path and the hiring strategy and our hiring plans and why we're not hiring or why we're not promoting. And if you don't give them that, then they could blow the whole thing up, right? I've had leaders tell someone they're going to get promoted in a month, and it's like, what do you mean? We don't even have a seat for them, but they didn't know what else to do. They didn't know what else to say. And they were put in a really difficult situation. And typically a frontline first time leader wants to please their team, because most of the time they were on their level like a couple months ago. So I think it's just really important arming them with the facts, or, as much as you can give them, but also coaching on that side of how do you handle this situation? How are you going to tell someone that you're not doing X, but if you want to be in this role, this is how you do it. And that takes practice, I think.
Yeah, I do. Somebody did ask a question about how do you manage sort of the timeline conversation. I think you gave that a really good answer to that, in that you need to prepare your frontline leadership on how to have that conversation. That's also a skip level conversation that I had a lot. So if I had a frontline manager that had top talent and they were struggling to respond to that, I was always super open to having that BDR, that early career rep talk directly to me, because I probably am in a better position to give that context. And that's also kind of showing my investment in that person that, you are important to me. I can't give you a promotion. Here's why. And it's not because I don't believe in you. I believe in you, and this is the time I want to spend with you. But what I really like pairing that with, Michelle, is your concept of really what are the expectations of that role. So let's have you test out the things that are expected from that role piece by piece. And one, does it motivate you? Do you like that kind of work? And then two, are you ready for it? One of the things that I've often used in having career conversations with people where I know there's not a promotion right on the horizon is to try to dig into what is the kind of work that gives you energy, and what takes energy away, and have people really reflect on how they can get a balance where, every job's going to have something you don't love, but a balance where there's more things that give them energy than not. And for first-time people leaders, I think that's a pretty important thing to learn, because I think you said it, and Brendan, our CEO, often says this, that being promoted from an IC to a manager is a promotion, a career change disguised as a promotion, because it is a fundamentally different job when you go into people leadership, and it's giving people ways to truly think about whether that's what's going to give them energy, really think about whether that's a progression or a career change that they're ready for, I think is important. And it seems to all come back to the first point of transparency that that we spent some time on initially. So I like that idea of a guide. I also don't like, rules with checkbox and timelines, as people will know who know me will know. So the idea that it's a bit gray, it's got a little shape to it is good by me. I want to move on to sort of the last topic, and certainly people start putting questions in the Q&A so that we can get the experience and expertise of our esteemed panelists. The last piece of the equation kind of stems a little bit from this, in the sense that to be successful, you need certain kinds of support. And so one of the major factors impacting productivity was that kind of access to resources. So we've talked a little bit about the clear expectations and goals, and seeing how that work fits into the bigger picture. I think that's a lot of that transparency, but access to resources, and that might be tools, that might be other things, is the other thing that salespeople really need. And I think that was a great story, Michelle, about the 35 minutes to close an op. I've sat in on those types of experiences as well. But as you guys think about the types of, we all represent tools that can help people, but what are the types of things that you think are kind of the non-negotiables in terms of the type of support that a sales team needs to be truly effective, tools or otherwise?
I'll take this one
Michelle.
first. Coming from really early stage, I have found it extremely valuable to use some type of call recording tool. And that's not only helpful for me as a leader to understand, okay, what's our go-to market strategy and what are customers saying, but it also provides you with more coaching opportunities. And it's something that I live in, and I have my leaders live in, and the reps are also living in those calls as well. So if you had a bad call, they share it with me, but I also ask them to re-listen to their call and provide themselves feedback. That is a really powerful tool that we use. And then more on the resources side is like constant training, discovery call training, film reviews, and then, what are those scorecards? So early on, you have to take the time to build yourself, which is what I did. But now we have an enablement manager who actually has the time and resources to do it. Anything to arm your team with training and coaching, because I have found over the years, my reps have been super hungry for more coaching and education than anything else. And we do them a disservice by not helping them and taking the time. On the tools front, it's crazy because I've hired so many people over the last few months, and everyone wants a different tool. And this tool helps them, this tool helps them, but narrowing it down, because you don't want too much noise in front of you. And I'd rather make it very simple and reduce the distractions. But the tools that they have found extremely valuable is anything that helps you find contacts and emails and titles. And then once you find that, how are you making it as fast and efficient as possible for them to hit those contacts? So any type of cadence or sequencing tool on top of all the coaching tools.
What about you, Chris?
Michelle, thank you for covering that. I think you articulated that so well. I was thinking in my mind, I'm like, I can't do that. Like, I'm a firm believer that, again, you need certain tools just to play and just to sell in this world, especially given what we're doing with the new remote environment and work from home and so on, to not only be efficient, but effective and to deliver, right? So I think you articulate that very well. You know, I go back to one of my statements, which is going back to software or SaaS companies or companies in general that are successful and growing fast, their ability to attract, develop, and retain. And I look at some of the tools which help to develop your organization. And I think they're, you know, the call recording and coaching tools. Yes. I look at onboarding and enablement as such a vital role. I'm grateful for the VP. Her name is Vanessa, who's here at Docebo, who is just an absolute rock star, and what she's done and what she continues to do, because she's very open to continuing to improve. But, you know, we eat our own spaghetti or drink our own champagne. We use our own platform here, our own LMS, to onboard and continuously enable and coach and train our team. I think that's how you take really strong players and create A+ players, and then you show them the career growth, and then it's just a really nice cycle there. There's a lot of tools that I'm also testing out and playing with as well too. Like I talked about management cadence tool and so on. But yeah, if I were to put my money on it, it's how do you further develop your group? And it goes back to that. Remember that old cartoon that you'd see? It's like, what happens if we train them and they leave? And then another is like, what happens if we don't train them and they stay?
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it goes to that.
I was when we had this conversation earlier, I can't remember why I was on this track, but it was sort of like, if I was looking for a role as a frontline salesperson, what would I kind of require there to be there? And there's certainly some tools, but I think signs that a company is serious about enablement is one of them that you guys just talked about. The other thing that I think I would require is probably access to customer references or access to customer stories. And some of that's my background, certainly in CS, but when I think of the thing that's going to help reduce friction or increase speed in a deal cycle is the quality of the proof points or the social proof that you can provide, and how seriously your company takes getting that, cultivating that, making it easy for reps, especially at a growth company. I remember I used to always make it really easy for my reps to get access to stories and references, because I knew how powerful that was, and I wanted everybody to feel like they had their own personal story. And it's tough, because if you're a new rep, you don't know the stories, you haven't had the deal cycle from end to end. So I spent a lot of time giving my sales team access to CS and trying to build that bridge there, because I'm like, until it sounds authentic, that you fundamentally believe the value you're giving and the value your customers are receiving, it's hard to build that trust with a prospect. So I think if I were looking for a sales job, that's one of the things I'd be looking for, is like, how easy is it for me to find customers, stories, references, that kind of thing, because that's really going to make it helpful along the way. All right, those are the three sort of big topics that we talked about. Anything from either of those earlier topics, Michelle or Chris, that you feel like you missed sharing something that was super important, or do you feel like you covered that?
I would say and I'd underscore what you just said, was if you're out on the outside looking in and you're evaluating a new career move, which goes opposite what I said about retention. But if you're looking at other SaaS companies, you need to evaluate how serious those organizations are in supporting you, right? So it goes to tools. It goes to, do they have a deal desk? Do they have an enablement or an operations group? Are there other groups to facilitate the success of you? And do they have those successful stories? Do they have the references? Like all of that, I think is important. I think it's still, is still a candidate market right now. And I still think that candidates have the ability to find their next home, and they have the ability to be picky. And I think it's on us, the three of us and others in our positions, to make our organizations as attractive as possible, to make sure that infrastructure is there and the support is there. So that's the one point I wanted to just highlight that you shared there.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're what I've enjoyed about the process of doing this research and then having these conversations with leaders like you is a strong reminder that that the old way of thinking about reps, that term coin operated, which I've never liked, I will admit have used, but I've never liked, is such a disservice to the profession of sales. But also you're going to get yourself in trouble if you really let any of that kind of thinking creep in. And if you spend all your time just thinking about the monetary compensation of your sales team, and not to dismiss the amount of intentionality and effort that needs to be put into a well-designed comp plan, you're just missing a huge opportunity to intentionally build a lot of other things that may even have a greater impact on whether people choose to join your company or stay with your company. And in a market as competitive as we've got right now, you really need to bring your A game in that recruiting, and that offer is not the only thing on the table. And I think early, I've seen, it's hard to watch people go through this, but I've seen so many early reps kind of leave for greener pastures because they saw a comp plan that looked like it was so much more favorable, but their ability to reach their OTE was, had the drag of so many other things, product problems, vision, other things like that. So the more that we focus on the other pieces of the equation that motivate a sales team, I think the better chance we have of having a great sales team and actually just bringing the profession along. It's really very complex to be sales leadership. And I think hopefully that people have seen the layers as we've gone through this conversation. Well, we've got, sort of 10 minutes left. And certainly I want to open that up for questions. I've got sort of one more for the panel, but certainly if we don't have more questions from the crowd, we can give everybody a few minutes back. The gift that keeps on giving, a little bit of extra time. I think I did want to just come back a little bit to that concept of transparency that you guys both came into. And if you were, again, giving advice to that first-time frontline manager about how to create that trust and openness to be able to do the coaching and feedback, what's a piece of advice that you could give somebody could try tomorrow as they're kind of early in their leadership career about sort of transparency and creating an environment where feedback coaching and all of that good stuff and that trust is built? What's something that you could share with somebody who's maybe a bit newer in their leadership career?
I think it's important to explain the why behind the majority of the stuff you roll out to your team, whether it's a new process, explain why. And typically you should have a little bit of data to back that. For example, we just had our BDR team move all demo requests to the AE team. So AEs are now getting our demo requests where the BDRs were not. Mm-hmm. And in order for us to get buy-in, I explain the why and the importance of that, and also some data points. So you're alleviating any question marks and also showing them the work that you did behind the change, as opposed to just saying you're going to do it and you're going to do it tomorrow. Yeah.
Chris, any advice for that early in their leadership career?
I was going to go with the lead with why, but Michelle did such a good job of explaining it. For me, and it's something that I'm working on, is put myself in that seller's shoes, right? I think a lot of times change management, new process, new tools, what have you, when you're doing them because in Docebo's case, we're a public company, or we're growing X percent, or we're moving to this market, or we're doing these changes. But at the end of the day, I think we really always just need to remind ourselves as a first-line manager all the way up to C-levels, how does this impact the seller or the people who are in the weeds in the day-to-day working with our clients and our leads and so on? And I think that's important. Michelle's 35 minutes to close an opportunity. I think a year ago we were about an hour.
Oh,
And I
God.
think we're happy that we're down under half an hour now. So,
Look,
it's things like that where if you're always reminding yourself of your internal customers or of the folks who are in the weeds, then I think you make smarter decisions and you do it more carefully and thoughtfully.
I think that's good advice. I'll share something that I learned from reading some other research on feedback and coaching. It's an area certainly that we're exploring from a content perspective as well. But beyond as a leader kind of asking for feedback, that's one way to kind of build trust, show that you're open to it. But what actually is more effective and has a longer lasting impact than that is if you share a time that you got feedback and made an adjustment and that it had a change in that. So I think because we heard so much about coaching and feedback in the last little bit, and I think in my experience in leading sales organizations, it's such a big part of that frontline management. If you can show them that not only can you take feedback, you can learn and grow from it, and that's the intent of the feedback kind of cycle that you're trying to create there, then that's going to have a lasting impact. So I think, that intentionality, that vulnerability, and that thing, and certainly for us at Hypercontext, that's why we put such an emphasis on one-on-ones and regular one-on-ones. I'm going to put one more call out to questions. Most of the questions are really about timing and some of the tougher things around career growth, which our study would tell you that is what people are struggling with the most. So Michelle and Chris, thank you so much for sharing your expertise there. But if there are no more questions, I want to thank our panelists for sharing their time and expertise with us, for all of you for joining us.